been a hero of mine for more than 30 years. When I first started as an intern with the Board of Global Ministries and was completely lost, Don was working downstairs and came up and helped me figure out how to actually tell the story of the China program where I was working. So for a long time, Don's been taking care of me. Don's been taking care of a lot of people in this church for many, many years, spending hours and hours in Wisca and in and out of meetings. And so today we just wanted to take a few minutes, about 30 minutes, to launch a series of conversations with some of our elders, some of the people who have lived amazing lives and whose stories we just may not know in great detail. So without further ado, I'm going to sit down. Don's got a microphone. He's told me what questions I'm supposed to ask him. And if you're having trouble, bring your seat to hearing, bring your seat closer. We have a mic, and Don's just going to eat that and talk as loud as we can. So, here we go. Hi, Don, and welcome to St. Paul and St. Andrews after-church conversation with our special humans.
Thank you. I'm honored. But first of all, let's get something straight. I didn't ask to do this. Because when you talk about yourself, it sounds like you're bragging, or you're thinking you want to tell everybody how great you are and how much you've done and how wonderful you are. We have somebody in this country doing that very well. And you don't need another. So, just so you know, I'm just going to talk about my life and how wonderful I've been. And how humble I've been all my life.
Probably the most humble person.
Until now. I'm going to brag like hell, and you'll find out what kind of a stud I am. In my early ministry, well, first of all, I was born in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I was asked a few years later to speak to the youth in First Methodist Church in Erie, Pennsylvania, and this was the speech that I gave them. And I thought it's very appropriate to start today with the first page of this speech. I was born in Erie at a very early age. I went to Erie schools, and I got 100 in my exams, 50 in arithmetic and 50 in spelling. The only thing right on my exams was the date. But that wasn't really my fault, because how do you expect me to learn to spell when they keep changing the words all the time? I tried to learn arithmetic, but one day they'd say 6 plus 4 equals 10. Everybody knows 5 plus 5 equals 10. It's just more than I could comprehend. I was in so much hot water that I felt like a tea bag. I was the teacher's pet because she couldn't afford a dog. I remember the day that I was promoted to third grade. And I got so excited I kept myself shaving. In the fourth grade, I was asked to play Lincoln. I was the only one who had a beard. It's downhill the rest of the way. My father we were a very poor family. My father worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. He was a clerk in the freight office. And my mother got a job hanging paper, helping people put up wallpaper. So that was a way to bring in a little bit of money. My dad built his own house on a piece of land that was next door to his parents who had moved in from the farm. And luckily, as you'll see in a minute, my grandparents lived next door to us. As I became a teenager. My grandmother's name was Amelia Schiller, and I found out that in one of the books we had in her bookcase that her grandfather was Schiller the poet in Germany. And I told my friend John Lovelace this one time. John used to write for one of our Methodist papers, and they went home and looked the thing up and sent me this. They said that Beethoven and Schiller were good friends. They lived about the time of the French Revolution, and Schiller wrote his poetry, and Beethoven was very much enamored with the words that he was reading. And so his Ninth Symphony, he used the words of Ode to Joy, which were Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and Schiller wrote the words for it. And that was my grandmother's grandfather. So there's some good stock back there somewhere.
When do I get to ask a question?
I was a very shy, bashful, and lonely little kid. I didn't have any friends. And my parents didn't go to church, and so my grandmother was the one who got me started in Sunday school. In 1936, I started writing in a diary, and I wrote for 12 years. I wrote in a type of diary, writing full, every page full. I didn't want to waste any space on the page, so no matter what, I would fill every page at the end of every day. And it was interesting to go back years later and then start to read some of these diaries and find out about myself and what I did when I was younger. And then I made a few notes from the diaries so I would remember all that. I had a job, one of my first jobs was hauling ashes. Well, back in those days, we heated the house with coal, and then the coal would burn up and the ashes would fall to the bottom of the furnace, and you'd shovel these ashes out, put them in a bushel basket, and then some little kid like me would come around to in your neighborhood and say, "Can I haul your ashes?" And then I would pour these ashes into my little wooden cart and push them off to the city dump about a mile or so away. And that's how I earned my first money. I earned 22 cents this first day, and this was on January 28, 1936. In April of that same year, Harper and Long, evangelists, came to Cascade Methodist Church, where I attended. And Harper was a preacher, evangelist. Now, back in those days, ministers would very often bring in an evangelistic team to preach for a week because they thought their congregation needed. So I was converted on April 19th in 1936, and well, the rest of it is history. I was in a Boy Scout minstrel show. Can you imagine? Back at that time, they had minstrel shows, and some of the older scouts would darken their face with burnt cork and cover themselves and tell jokes, darky jokes. And I was in the chorus. I wasn't good enough to tell jokes, but we sang. And I had there on June 1st that I finished reading the Bible all the way through. It had taken me 2 years, but I finished it. I was picking raspberries from our yard every few days, in July and sold them for a nickel a basket to make a little money. And moving on, holy smokes, I'm skipping a lot of interesting life. On the 31st of January in the next year, I was saved. And my mother began to get sick. She had headaches in February and March. She was in bed. The doctor came. Mother was sick in bed. Mother was still in bed the next day. And on April 21st, my father woke me up at 1:30 in the morning and said, "Wake up, son, your mother has just passed." And so at 14 years of age, I was pretty much on my own. My dad and I lived in the same house, but he worked for the railroad, worked nights. I sometimes would go a whole week without seeing him. That's why it was good my grandmother lived next door. But she fed me my evening meals, and I was on my own for the rest. But in September, Mr. Welch, my Sunday school teacher, took us fishing. And that was pretty nice because he was an old railroad engineer, and where you shoveled the coal in to keep the engine going. And his face was red, and he wasn't too well educated, but he was dedicated to his Sunday school class, and I happened to be in it, which was really great. And as I'll tell you later on today, about 2:30 this afternoon, I'll get to this part.
I love college, Don.
I got some. Where is it? Every. Yeah. Oh, I was getting saved about every couple of weeks. May 5th, I went to the Gospel Tabernacle. It was the best service I've ever heard, and I know that I am saved for good. Well, that was until next month. When I accepted Jesus on the 28th of May, and Jesus is my Savior, and I hope I won't slip again. And then on June 27th, I accepted Jesus as my personal Savior before going to bed. And then on the 10th of July, I accepted Jesus as my personal Savior at 25 minutes to 11. And this is for the last time, I know. I don't know how I was such a horrible sinner. I can't think back of any of my sins. That's the sad part. But I got saved from them. So about that time, I was thinking, I was a senior in high school, and talked to my minister about what I was going to do. And my thought was, since these evangelists were so important to my life, that I would become an evangelist, and I would get 14 sermons, and I would preach them for 2 weeks in some community, and then I'd move on to another community and preach those same 14 sermons. I was going to do that for the rest of my life. But fortunately, I had a good pastor, and he said, maybe it would be good if you got some education. And so we go to the Board of Education in Nashville, got their recommendations for schools, and they sent me the names of Millsaps in Mississippi, and Hamlin in Minnesota, and Randolph-Macon in Virginia, and Cornell College in Iowa. I got their catalogs, read them all, and chose Cornell. Now, the reason I went to Cornell was because Glenn Cunningham, who was the fastest man in the world at the time, a famous miler, he ran the health department at Cornell. He was no longer running, for competition, but was now had himself a job. and he was going to be there on the campus. So I thought, well, that's a good school to go to. So, oh, here I hold ashes. And I made 12.5 cents. That was pretty neat. But then I got myself a big boy's job, and and I was saved again in March. we're back to 39 now, so that's in two years I was saved. Wow.
I'm glad to finally go.
You want me to finally?
Yeah.
I don't know yet. I don't know. I said a bad word this morning.
Maybe you should move on to college. What do you think?
Okay. You want me to move on?
Yeah.
You don't know what you're missing. All right. Let's move on. I had a job in high school as a soda jerk. And I want to share this because it's so important. I'm sorry. I was working at Bourne's Dairy, and after school I went to work from 6 until midnight. And on this particular day in February, and remember I was training on the track. I was running high school track, and this is what I had to eat in one day: 2 Cokes, 2 root beers, a piece of pie, cheeseburger, donut, a milkshake, 2 hot fudge sundaes, and a soda. Pretty high living, huh? And after working in the dairy bar for a while, I got a job at the Talon Zipper factory, which was just 3 blocks from my home, and that paid a little bit more money. I think I was making more like $13 a week doing that, and that helped me save up for school. But when it was time to go to college, my dad and I got on the train in Erie at 10:30 in the morning, got to Chicago at 5:45, walked around Chicago for the evening, took an 11:30 train, and headed for Mount Vernon, Iowa. Got there the next morning at 7 a.m., and we got my big truck that had everything I owned in it, hauled it up to the dorm where I was to stay, and at 3 o'clock that afternoon, my dad got back on the train and went home, and he didn't even stay in there for 1 day. And here I was, a quiet, shy little kid, all by myself out in the middle of Iowa. And that began my college days. Took a long time to get there, didn't it? Why don't I just put this away and just talk?
You're doing great now.
Yeah.
Were there things in college that you wanted to tell us about?
I became quite well known in school as a track star, and I was so organized. I had this darn thing all together, knew exactly what I was doing until I got here. Sorry about this, I really am.
You're doing great.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
This was from the Cornell newspaper. Maybe you'd like to read that.
All right. Matt?
All right, from the Cornell newspaper, Don Struchen rips off a 52.2 quarter win. For the first time since 1926, Cornell whipped Coe in the annual dual track meet. He's highlighted in red what I'm supposed to read. Don Struchen's stellar 440 triumph enabled Paul Scott's team to take 6 of the 8 running events. The 440 race was the outstanding event of the day. Struchen hit the tape at 52.2, his fastest time yet, after being neck and neck with the Coe's freshman Wow, freshman Negro, Russell Collins. Collins had the pole but couldn't match the stirring finish of the purple soft.
And then later on, we went to different relays and the Drake relays in Des Moines, Iowa, the Chicago relays, the Purdue relays. So we were running all over the Midwest. And then one year, my one year, we went to East Lansing, Michigan for the National Cross Country Meet. And we were running there with all the Big Ten schools, Illinois, Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, all those schools. And they gave, it was a 4-mile run. They gave gold medals to the first 5, silver medals to the next 5, and bronze medals for the next 5. I got the first silver medal, so I came in 6th in the whole race out of the 45 or so that were running. I found out later that this qualified me to be when you get old, the mind goes. It qualified me to be All-American cross country for that year. So that was. The other thing that was important in college, and let me get away from all reading all this stuff. I roomed with a guy named Hank Hauser, and his parents were missionaries who had served in the Philippines, and when the Japanese began rumbling in the Pacific, they got out and came to Colorado, and his father was serving in a church in Denver. They sent Hank to Cornell to college. The older brother was a guy named George Hauser, who was along with Bayard Rustin, they started CORE, which was one of the social action agencies at that time. And so George would bring Bayard Rustin and Jim Farmer to the campus at Cornell, and they would speak at different occasions in the chapel to the whole student body. And then at the end of the day, they came to our room and we sat around and had rule sessions with these guys. So it was a complete change from all the converting stuff that I had been living and doing in high school, but to have my eyes opened up that there was a broader world out there and where people were really in need and something needed to be done. So it was very influential in my life. Hank was a pacifist. He had to leave school because everybody was being drafted and all that kind of stuff after December 7th. On December 7th, we were in, for you kids, December 7th was the bombing of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, and in 1941. And we were at church in the morning. We came home from church, and I found that all the kids in the dorm were sitting around the radio listening to the announcement about what the Japanese were doing in Pearl Harbor and what was happening there. So it was very close, and that changed the campus, Cornell campus, completely, because next year they brought a Navy unit in for their training, and we had to get out of the dorms and move into private homes, and it was just, and guys began to get drafted, and it was just entirely different. But I think probably that's enough of that.
Where are we, Don? What's next?
Why don't we leave college? I could graduate from there, and I went to seminary. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
I
Where'd you go to seminary, Don?
I went to Garrett Seminary in Evanston, Illinois. It's on the Northwestern University campus. And my first year there, I waited tables to earn a little bit of money. The next year there, I became the director of the dining hall, and also got a job as an associate pastor in Oak Park, Illinois. And every Sunday I would get up and take the elevated from Evanston out to Oak Park and work with the young people, help with the morning service, and help with the youth throughout the day. So that's how I began heading into learning what to do as a minister. That was it. It was a great experience. And then, it was while we were at Garrett that my friend, one of my college friends, we heard about this thing where they were sending cattle and horses overseas. The war. We've gotten to Garrett, haven't we? Yes, we were at Garrett. And the war was over, and they were sending animals overseas to help the farmers to stock their fields again, so they could grow their produce and whatever and get started after the war, because so much had been devastated. And so George Carson and I hitchhiked from Evanston to Newport News, Virginia, where we got on the Carroll Victory ship, and we were assigned to take horses to Trieste. It took us 2 weeks to get there, and I kept a diary.
All the times you were saved on the way to Trieste.
But just here, pass these around, and people can see what we looked like in those days. We had 791 horses, and 48 of them died. My friend, a guy named Stan Summers, and I were in charge of 44 horses in the first hold of the ship. That was right up in the front, where if we were running into a mine, we would have been the first to blow up. But our horses were down 2 or 3 levels and standing in stalls all next to each other. The horses were not allowed to lie down, so we had to keep them on their feet. Our job was to give them water and hay and barley and whatever else we fed them, and to help the vet take care of them if they needed it. Also to take the horse's temperature. Well, now, you don't put a glass temperature in a horse's mouth.
Thank you. That's very graphic.
Just wanted you to know my life wasn't all sweet. It got a little bit tough. We got up early in the morning, but as we got out to sea, it began to pitch and roll, and I got seasick. It was 95 degrees down in the hold, and we would be down there with these horses. And one time there was a flash, and I looked down, and a horse had my arm in his teeth. And fortunately, he didn't. And these were all wild horses. They had not been tamed or anything. They came in off the range. So I got the horses to let go, and it wasn't too bad. It was just broke the skin a little bit. So I survived.
I'm glad you didn't die with the other horses.
No, but that was something. Every morning they would go through all of the ship and haul the dead horses out and drop them overboard. Actually, during the day, evenings, we would be up on the top hold of the ship, and we would have gospel lessons and studies and stuff like that. Most of the cowboys were Mennonites or United Church of the Brethren, the peace churches, or they were pre-medical students or pre-theological students. So that was the kind of caliber of the people who were doing the seagoing cowboy job.
Don, can I ask you, so how did this experience with the Sea Cowboys shape your sense of ministry, mission, where you ended up going with your life?
Yeah, when we got to shore after 2 weeks, and by the way, as we went through the Mediterranean, I was reading a book called Ben-Hur, written by Lew Wallace. I don't know if any of you have ever read it, but Ben-Hur was a slave, and in his book it described how he rode through the Straits of Messina between Italy and Sicily. And on that very day that I read that in the book, our ship went through the Straits of Messina. What's the likelihood of that happening? Anyway, got to Trieste. They unloaded the horses and whatever, and we had 4 days ashore in Trieste. And went to the Waldensian Church on Sunday morning. It was interesting. It was an old church built in something like before. Doesn't matter when it was built.
Something happened there, though.
Yeah, it happened because as we went in, they were singing they were singing something. What good does it do to make notes and prepare? They were singing the church's one foundation, which was very inspiring to hear when you're that far from home. And it was, I became aware of how poor the pastor and the family were and what they were sacrificing to serve this church in Trieste. As later on, many years later, the Heifer Project wrote this whole thing up in their, you maybe have heard of Heifer International, and they wrote the story up about the seagoing cowboys, and they interviewed me for the article, and there's a page that tells all about it and about myself, and shows a picture of the young lady that we met at the Red Cross and who took us swimming. And it was when George and I went swimming with these 2 young ladies on a Sunday afternoon, but we had to take turns swimming because we only had one bathing suit.
I will note that the caption underneath Don's picture says, "The Heartthrob."
I didn't say that.
I would say that pictures confirm that.
Yeah.
Right? Pictures go on.
Somehow, 50 years later, they knew that still.
Well,
Nothing changes.
So,
on the way home, when they got the horses unloaded, we also, while we were on shore, we went to an outdoor opera. There was an opera house in Trieste where they were playing Carmen. And so I heard, we went in and stood, we couldn't get seats, so we stood along along a brick wall along the back and listened to the opera Carmen. That was kind of exciting. On the way home, our job was to clean the ship, and which we did, and because after they had unloaded the horses, they shoveled all the manure overboard, and then we got to clean the ship and scrub down the stalls and everything on the way home. And
So I think, I don't know, we may have maybe about 10 or 15 minutes
yeah,
left. So I'm trying to think about how we get to the amazing journey that you have had in your life since the Seagoing Cowboys.
Okay, let me bring this to an end by saying I began taking on this trip. I had $66.73 in my pocket. The trip cost me $41.22 all the way to Trieste and back. I received a check from the Brethren Church in payment for the work done of $160. So not bad for a summer's work.
Well done.
That was that. Okay, I graduated from seminary and I was appointed to two little churches in my home conference, Erie Conference in Pennsylvania. These were churches south of Erie, Pennsylvania, about 50 miles. One was about 300 members, the other was about 100 members. And I served there. I always heard that the minister should get acquainted with his parishioners and be one of them. So I went fishing one day I went hunting. I went hunting for the first time. I borrowed a hunting outfit and a gun, and went hunting with some of my parishioners. We were there looking for bear. Had we seen a bear, I would still be running. I don't know what in the world I was thinking. That I was going to stand there and shoot a bear. So I quit hunting. That was the end of my hunting days. I took up fishing. Until one day I was standing out of cold spring morning, putting little worms on a hook and throwing them in the creek. And not getting a bite and a nibble or nothing. I saw all the work I had on my desk back at the church. I thought, what am I doing here? And I went home, and that was the end of my fishing experiences. And that's when I got out my magic stuff again, which I had always been interested in through high school and whatever. And I put together a little magic show. And the Meadville newspaper heard that this musician down in Cochranton, where my churches were, did magic. And so they put an article in the paper telling about this magical magician, and man, did that take off. I was getting calls from every Grange and Lodge and mother and daughter banquets and blue and gold banquets from all around the community there, and I packed up my little tricks and take my stand and drive off to these little towns and do a show and drive back home. And sometimes they give me $5 for doing all that, and so it grew and became much more influential until eventually when I later was working for the Board of Global Ministries, made a video of my magic act, which was called Mission with a Little Magic. And I illustrated the entire mission job and what local churches could do with magic. So it did come in handy.
So that got your first church going.
That was my first, yeah. And I was there 5 years. It was a good experience. I didn't ask to leave, but the conference needed somebody to be the executive secretary for Christian education. Back in those days, every annual conference of the Methodist Church had an executive secretary for education who worked for the conference. And the job was to set up all the summer camps and to train Sunday school teachers in all the churches, in 200 or more churches that we had in our conference, and to encourage them to use Methodist literature and work with the whole education program of the church. They asked me if I would be interested in that job. I didn't know anything about Christian education, so I said yes. And so I moved to Meadville, Pennsylvania, which was just 10 miles away, and I did that job for 8.5 years. And it was very fulfilling because I was able to develop a camping program and just had a good, learned all about education in the Methodist Church. And then there was a woman named Helen Johnson, who some of you would know. And she worked for the women's division here in New York at their offices. And she heard that there was a guy leaving his position at the Board of Global Ministries, the Board of Missions it was called, here in New York at that time. That he was leaving his job and going back to his local church in Massachusetts. And they needed somebody. Helen Johnson knew that I might be available because our conferences were being split up back in Pennsylvania, but on conference lines, on state lines. And so the Erie Conference was going to join the Pittsburgh Conference and become the Western Pennsylvania Conference. I would be out of work. So the people here at the Board of Missions asked me if I would be interested in this job at the board. I didn't know anything about missions, so I said, sure. They invited me to come for an interview, and they invited me to take the job. I took it, and I was there for 27 years. Now, the job that I had was rather interesting because one of the things I did was, this magazine, New World Outlook, and they took a picture of me to advertise the United Methodist Development Fund. But standing right next to me is Jorge Dominguez. He first came to the board, and I didn't realize I had this until I started to get ready for this presentation.
Excellent. Okay, so maybe a different one.
Huh?
Hold it up so we can see it.
I think you must have a different one, because this is not the one with Jorge.
That's not?
No.
Who's this? If that's not him, isn't that
It
him?
looks a lot like him.
Well, you know it wasn't him at that time. People change, man. I didn't look like that.
Just hold it up, Ken.
That's not him. Listen, this is what my job was with the Board of Missions, and this is from my resume. I was a coordinator of mission leaders of the section of mission development in Education and Cultivation Division. The job consists of preparing resource materials and training opportunities for the local church work area of chairpersons of missions and the conference and district mission leaders who are the linkage to the local church. This is done basically by writing articles in Interpreter magazine and a monthly mailing called TV Guidelines, which I developed, as well as other personal correspondence. So I did that job, and it provided so many opportunities. Here is I won't read this, but just to show you, these were all of the places that I went in trying to do this job. And I worked in every annual conference in the Methodist Church. We conducted workshops and training in Mount Sequoia for the South Central jurisdiction, Lake Junaluska for the Southeastern jurisdiction, of Sealamar for the Western jurisdiction, Silver Lake for the Northeastern jurisdiction, and every summer I would go and spend a week training the leaders. Out at Mount Sequoia one summer, I said to the group as we started, I said, tell the group, tell us all about the wonderful things that you did in your church for missions this past year. And this guy from Texas got up and he said, man, this is what we've done. And he went on and on about the activities and all the wonderful things that their church was doing in mission and supporting our mission work. When he got through, I said, that is fantastic. Where in the world did you get all those ideas? He said, well, we were in your workshop last year. So we remember."
Good work,
That's
Don.
pretty satisfying.
That's very impressive.
Yeah. Very often I would start a workshop or a training thing by asking everybody to think of a number. So I'll ask you to think of a number that you can work with in your mind. Now double it. Okay. Add 10. Now divide by 2. I'll wait for it. This will take a minute.
I'm ready.
Now subtract the first number you thought of. How many of you have 5? Amazing.
Your math,
And then from there you say, see, yeah, everybody thinking alike in the same way. And you do that in your churches as you work for missions and collect your money and educate your people and whatever. The world will be a much better place.
Yeah. Well, ask me a question, but he has his own plan. I think one of the things I'd like to know is, after 27 years at the Board of Global Ministries, I mean, we're now having a chance to sit here with somebody who, from a small town, went off and saw the world, allowed the world to transform his life, went to a little Methodist church, got out of there, went to seminary, started to think bigger about the world, was called by the Methodist Church into mission, into service and ministry, and for 27 years shaped the mission projects of local churches all across this country. So this is an amazing ministry that you've had, Don. I knew you for a while in the 80s while you were doing that, but a lot of my experience has been with you here at St. Paul and St. Andrew. So I'm wondering, after retirement, what's your sense of your ministry and mission and how all these earlier things have shaped your engagement? I know this is not on what you wanted to talk about.
No, but you've just been saying what I was going to say.
All right.
Did you read these notes?
No, just listening carefully.
I just wanted to say that in all of this, I have never asked for a raise. I've never asked for how much money I was getting. Or I didn't even know most of the time how much I was being paid for what I was doing. I never asked for a job in the church. I only took what I was asked to do and tried to do it to the best of my ability. And I'm not bragging. I'm just sharing with you my life in a very poor way. I'm sorry I got so mixed up in these damn notes. But it's been a fantastic life. I cannot help but think that God guided me somehow, because I don't have the brains to do all this or the nose to do all this by myself. I had to be guided by somebody else. I'm not trying to blame God, that somehow He has touched my life or used me in whatever way He desired, and it's been good. When I retired and we came here to New York, I was sick of going to meetings, and so that's when I started going down to the food pantry and helping out down there on the days that they would unload the trucks and stuff. So I stocked the shelves and worked down there and did that, and have been doing that for about 20 years now. But lately I have not had the energy or the strength to do it, so I'm kind of working my way out of a job. There's a lot.
Would you like to share a few of your magic tricks with us?
I wouldn't like to, but I will. You know, this is... awesome stuff. Okay, I gotta stand up for this, and if I fall down, Ken, I'll gotta go. Okay. See, your old man ain't what he used to be. I got a little block here.
Can I hold this up to you? Will I get in your way or not?
Can you hear me without?
No, use the mic.
Use the mic. Little block, and every side has a different color on it. Chris, I always like to use the kiddies in the front row. You want to put the block in the, well, I'll turn my back.
Okay.
But put the block in the box and cover it up. But remember which color you would put on top. I just need to know which one is on. You need to know.
Done.
It's done? You have put the block, all different colors. Now those colors could represent people. Maybe they're black people, white people, yellow people, red people. I mean, all different kinds. So, it was, how would I know? By just touching the outside, or holding it here, or holding it up here. How would I know that you put red on top? Okay, now for my final number. And they say if you give a magician enough rope, he'll hang himself.
Not here, not today.
Not today. I'm just going to do a naughty trick. Just go. See what I mean? That's not magic. Well, what is?
Come on, we're going to see it, right?
Huh? You're going to see it. You just drop it like that. All right. In our church today, we are being divided. Some people think the church should split. And some of the more conservative ones go one way, and the progressive ones and the right-wingers and the left-wingers all go their separate ways. And we split on because we don't believe everybody should have their own sex.
It's your show, Don.
Okay, so I'm going to cut the rope in half to have it to show that, well, just to show you what can happen. You take this, and I'm just going to bring the short wrist up like this and ask you to cut it in half so they're both the same. That's it, right up there. That's it.
Oh, no. So sad.
Nicely done. Now, 2 pieces of rope. Oh, don't go away. It's not over. You didn't quite get to the same way. I mean, would you please take the scissors and cut them off? For this to work, they have to be the same length, you see? Understand that? All right, now 2 pieces of rope, one just as...
What is going on?
Well, you're standing right here, if you can't tell. I'm better than I think I am. It's being split up into different people, you know, being split up. And it's not, it doesn't look good. It's not nice. It's not the way church should be. May I borrow your scissors? But don't go away. Because I'm going to trim this down a little bit. And did you bring any roofer dust with you?
Did I bring any what?
Roofer dust. Roofer dust.
No, I did not.
Well, Well, fortunately, I have some with me. Don't drop it. I mean, it's a little more. It's free. Take it. So we just sprinkle that buffer dust on there. Doesn't see through that nice. Take the end of the rope in your hand. Look what happens. Church is united, and that's the way it should stay. Thank you so much. You know who your friends are. The fact that you even stayed to listen. But thank you, and I love you all.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. And we look forward to another event in the fall and another set of stories about life and mission and ministry and the amazing gifts of God in people's lives. We are a gift of God in our lives, Tom. Thank you so much.
All right.